Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name is Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all popular podcast platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Steve Haffner, and Steve's business is called Pinnacle Thinking, and we're going to be discussing decision performance. And Steve is a mental performance and productivity expert. He had a 30-year corporate career as a programmer, system engineer, and executive and business analyst for companies such as EDS, Mercer, and Humana. In 2011, Steve left the corporate world to launch his own business as a magician and mentalist, and now presents keynote and workshop presentations for associations and businesses. Steve's experiences as a corporate professional, executive, business owner, and magician give him a unique perspective on how subconscious illusions influence our decision-making.
Talking with the Experts.
Welcome, Steve, and thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Rose. It's great to be here with you.
I would love to know more about how you got into being a magician.
Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy. You know, imagine that you're the department head, a department director at a Fortune 500 company, and one morning, one of your managers comes up and knocks on the door and says, "Boss, I quit." And you're like, "You quit? Why? I thought things were going great." And he says, "I'm quitting to become a magician." What would you think? You'd think he lost his mind or midlife crisis, you know. But that was me. I walked in, after a 30-year career in IT, and I was actually a business analyst at the time. And I had this desire for a number of years to go out on my own, launch my own business. And I had magic as a hobby, and I absolutely loved it. I always had this creative side, and I love to write, I love to perform, but I got into computer science out of college because that was the stable choice, for a job and a career path. There were going to be a lot of jobs and pretty well paying. So that's the path that I took, although it didn't really align with what, my real passions were and what I love to do and what I felt, were some of my best talents, and that is in the realm of creativity. So I finally decided, I'm going to make the jump, and I'm going to do it. And so I made that dubious decision to start my own business as a magician. Dubious decision. Those aren't my words. It's my wife's words. No, I'm kidding. She was on board, and it was it was good. And I've kind of morphed and pivoted along the way, doing different types of magic. First for kids at school shows and preschools and birthday parties and fairs and festivals, and then I was doing corporate performances as a mentalist. And that's a branch of magic. I don't know, Rose, have you heard that term mentalist before?
Yeah.
Okay. So that has to do with virtual mind reading and subliminal influence and things like that. And then I pivoted back several years ago from strictly performing to doing speaking, and speaking on the topic of, what I call decision performance. And I still use some of the fun magic and mentalism segments in my speaking presentations, to keep things lively, keep people on their toes, and make it memorable and fun for them.
Yeah. So I guess using that skill as a mentalist, how does this help, businesses?
Mm-hmm. Well, as a mentalist and magician, I had to learn how to fool the human mind, first of all. And it turns out it's not that hard to fool.
No.
Because, in a lot of cases, we fool ourselves. And what I discovered as I started learning more about psychology and behavioral science, and I was picking these kind of things up so that it would help me with my performances. But I was learning how much our subconscious mind adversely affects our decision-making in ways that we're not even familiar with. So I call them cognitive illusions, and you've maybe have heard the term cognitive biases and heuristics, and those are shortcuts the mind makes to help us navigate decision making and moving through the world
Yeah.
with all the information coming at us, and there's impulsive preferences that we have they all come from the subconscious, and most of them are based in the primitive part of our brain called the reptilian brain, or sometimes lizard
Oh,
brain.
yes.
I call it the lizard. And we have this preference for always being on the lookout for potential threats so that we can avoid them and stay safe, right? Because
Absolutely.
that's the purpose of that part of the brain, is keeping us alive so that we can pass on our DNA to future generations, and so with those subconscious illusions, those subconscious impulses to stay safe and always avoid danger, that means we're always doing things at the subconscious level where we're looking out for danger, we're looking for threats, we're trying to there's one of the cognitive biases I talk about is called the status quo bias. So we have a desire to stay in the safe, in the familiar of the status quo, rather than growing. And that hampers innovation, it hampers creativity, it hampers diversity, but it keeps us from growing when we use that desire to stay safe as the primary driver of our decisions. All right. So there's nothing wrong with staying safe, but we, as 21st century humans, we're usually not in too much danger of getting eaten all of a sudden, like in the wild when the lizard brain developed. So we have other higher level priorities, as humans. We want to have great relationships. We want to succeed at our jobs, and want to succeed, in our personal lives as well. And we want to do the best we can. We want to be competent in our jobs, and we do want to grow. We want to grow and learn and always be improving. So that's, we have those types of instincts as well. And they conflict with the lizard brain instincts sometimes. So I have discovered, as I have studied psychology and behavioral economics, I have learned about these different cognitive biases that negatively affect our decision making. And if we can recognize them, and I call that confronting the lizard, if we confront the lizard and recognize when these might be getting in our way and hampering effective decision making, then we can kick it up from the lizard brain up to our big brain and think about it and put a different filter on our choices, on our decision making, rather than the fight or flight instinct and the negativity that the lizard brain is throwing at us.
Yeah. So, as we all know, professionals are paid to think and make decisions, and the quality of their work, or even our work as staff members or managers, depends on the quality of our decisions. So we're often beset by subconscious illusions that interfere with our ability to make those decisions. So how can we move forward and towards our goals and reflect on our own values?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's when I had mentioned the filter and confronting the lizard and using a different filter. What I always try to get people to do, and this is sort of my overall big mission for why I speak to groups and what I try to help them with, is to help their decision making better align with their goals and their values. And I don't try to influence what their values should be or what their goals should be, but I want to get them to think more about them, their high level goals and what their values are, so that then when in their decision making process, now they've got something that they can align them with. So for example, if integrity might be the top of somebody's list of values, and I always recommend know what your values are and express them to the world. So put them on your website as a value statement, or part of your mission statement, but let people know why you do what you do and what's important to you, because one, that's going to connect you better with them. They're going to trust you more, but then that's a way to hold yourself accountable to making decisions that align with those values. So if you might have a goal, you want to reach a financial goal, but if you act in such a way that it reaches that goal, but maybe it doesn't align with your value of integrity, well, then, then you're not living your values and you're not really being successful. So you have to keep your values and goals in mind. And that's how I define decision performance, the ability to align your decisions with your goals and your values.
Yeah. So I know you've talked about getting the lizard brain up into the big brain and all that sort of stuff, but how do people actually elevate, from the lizard brain to the big brain and not get stuck in the middle?
Yeah, well, the hard part. So there's a couple of steps. And the first one is to recognize, recognize some of these cognitive biases. So that's where I come in and I teach some of these things that are interfering. And so that's the hard part. You have to get kind of in the habit of looking for them so that you can then interrupt them. And I'll give you an example. Imagine you're watching, maybe, I don't know if you enjoy sports or if you have a favorite team that you like to watch, but imagine you're watching a sports event and the referee, the official, makes a terrible call against your team, right? And you're like, now as sports fans, it's in our DNA to make a judgment call about that official and his intentions. Now, it could be positive. We could say, well, he made a mistake. The game moves fast. It's hard to see everything. Where people are human. Live and let live. Oh, well. But, most people don't do that. We get mad and we say, oh, that's the third bad call he's made against our team in this game. There's something going on. He's wanting us to lose. Oh, he's probably getting paid by the other team. So we are more likely, when we have uncertainty about somebody and their intentions, we're more likely to assume the negative than we are the positive about them. And if you think about it, that goes right back to the lizard brain that's always looking for threats. Is it safer when you walk out your front door, excuse me, and there's a squirrel in your yard? I guess, are there squirrels in Australia?
No, we have drop bears.
Oh, okay. Well, say there's one. Do they climb trees?
They do.
Okay. So there's one in your yard. You walk out your front door and it runs up the tree, right? You're not a threat to it, but it doesn't know that. So is it safer for it to assume you're a threat or to assume that you're not a threat? Well, it's safer, of course, to assume that you're a threat. So that's kind of how the lizard brain works. And, if we don't know something about somebody, we automatically make an assumption, a negative assumption that, it could be something bad. This person could be a threat, or they could have some underlying motivation. And we call that suspicion. Suspicion is at the base of negative assumptions, and that's all based on the lizard brain fear and trying to keep us safe. But the problem with suspicion is it's at the opposite end of the scale from trust, right? You can't have trust and suspicion at the same time. And trust is one of the, if not the, and a lot of people say it's the most important trait for leaders, for managers. If you want to retain people, if you want to engage your employees, trust is the number one trait that you need. High trust relationships move much faster, you can get much more done in high trust relationships than you can in low trust relationships. And there have been studies. Yeah. And there have been studies done, and this was really surprising when I read this, where they, studied hundreds of organizations and they looked at profitability, and they found the one trait that most determined profitability was trust. And that high trust organizations are up to 300% more profitable than low trust organizations. That was really surprising to me. But if you think about how much smoother and less stressful it is to be able to move and get things done in high trust relationships than in low trust relationships, well, then it kind of makes sense.
It does. So I guess we've covered, quite a lot of stuff here, but I don't know, you've talked about illusions, cognitive biases, mental shortcuts, and, other sort of impulses that, people have. Mm-hmm. But what are the other things that hinder, someone's leadership skills or the ability to lead a team?
Sure. Well, one thing that a lot of organizations or individuals don't do is have a specific decision-making process. And that's a great way to overcome some of these lizard brain cognitive biases, is to have a specific process in place. Especially, of course, you don't need it for every decision you make, but for the impactful ones, the ones that are difficult to reverse once you make them, it's important to have a process in mind, or a process that you're going to implement, so that you're not going to be driven by emotion, or or fear, or some of these other 180 cognitive biases there are. And part of a decision process should be, and one of my speaking programs is on team building, it's called Cohesive, is using a team. There have been studies done between where they study team decision making versus individual decision making. And individuals are good if they're lower cost, and an individual can make a decision faster than a team can, of course. And if it's a decision that can be easily reversed, or if it's not a huge impact on a large number of people, then an individual might be the way to go. But in most circumstances, especially when the quality of the decision is vitally important, and when you have lots of options that you need to consider and look at, and when you have a large number of stakeholders or people that are going to be affected by the decision, then team decision making, you're going to get much better results. Study after study has shown this. And one of the reasons is it's hard for us to see our own cognitive illusions. Even though I teach people how to do it, it's difficult. We get tied up emotionally in a situation or in a decision process, and we don't recognize these things that are influencing us, but other people do recognize it in us. So other people are a better judge of us than ourselves, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because you'd think, who knows you better than you, Rose, except for Rose, right? Well, it turns out just about everybody else knows you better in many ways. There's a funny study that was done where they would have two people, total strangers. One would sit at a table, and another would come and sit at the other side of the table and read a weather report. And that's it, just a bland weather report. And then they'd be done. They'd walk away. And then they'd ask each of them to guess what the IQ was of the person that read the weather report. So one person is trying to guess their own IQ, and the other one is trying to guess that stranger's IQ. You know who was more accurate at guessing the IQ?
The stranger.
The stranger, yeah, who had never even met them before and had only, seen them for a minute. So we're not very good at assessing ourselves. We tend to overestimate our abilities. 80% of people think that they're better drivers than the average driver. 90-something% of professors think that they're better teachers than their colleagues, that they're above average. 84% of Frenchmen think that they're better lovers than average. So we overestimate how good we are at our jobs, how much we give to charity. So we're really not very good judges of ourselves. And that just points to why it's important to get a team involved, because team members can see things, about us that we can't see ourselves, and can keep some of those types of illusions from entering into the decision-making process, if you will. Here's a great example. During my corporate career, I worked for a manager he was a great guy. Everybody liked him, but somebody had sent him an email that was questioning a decision he had made, and he got emotionally tweaked by it. And he sent off an email back, and it was kind of snarky and sarcastic and angry. And he got into a bit of hot water because of it. Well, he didn't want that to happen again. So he came up with a plan that from then on, if somebody sent him an email that raised his temperature, so to speak, he would write up the reply, but wouldn't send it to them. He would send it to me first. And then I, who didn't have that high emotional attachment to that situation, I could look at it with a more clear, objective perspective, and I could go through it and edit it for appropriateness, or take out any profanity or any sarcasm that was in there, and send it back to him. And then he would send it out, and it worked great. He never had that situation again. So I think that just speaks to, we're one of the benefits of making sure that you work, in a team whenever possible, when you're making some of these higher level impactful decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I used to have a manager that used to do the same with me.
Oh yeah.
If they got a bit heated under the collar, send Rosie the email, and Rosie will fix it and put the right words in there so I don't sound like a total beast.
I wondered what the word was going to be that you would use there. Beast is a good one.
It is a good one. So I guess the next, that sort of leads on, I guess, to how can we as leaders or managers separate our emotion from our, the logical part. It's hard to not be emotional when sometimes you need to make a decision. Is it going to be suitable for the team? Is it going to backfire on me? Is it going to be something that my supervisor or manager is not going to like? Or so how do we separate the emotion out of a decision?
Mm-hmm. Well, and first of all, let me say that an emotion in and of itself is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that. That's one of the beautiful parts of us being humans, is that we have, these emotions, and they are helpful. Even negative emotions like fear, are very important in the right circumstances. But what we have to do is we have to recognize when we have this high level of emotion. It helps to write it out. Write down, what is it that you're feeling? What is this emotion? And if you can put some distance between yourself and the decision that you're about to make before you express your opinion or before you make the decision, put some distance, either time-wise, sleep on it, don't make that decision right away, don't react to that situation right away, or put some distance by what I talked about before, running it through somebody else, having other people that don't have that emotional attachment so that they can help make a more sober decision. And, that's the difficult thing to do, is that recognition of when you've got that emotional tie to a situation. And that's just it's a habit. It's like anything. You have to develop the habit of recognition. You have to start thinking about it, and you have to, just make it part of your routine when you are going to respond or express anything, any kind of statement or opinion, or make any impactful decision, is to take a second and say, okay, how emotionally involved in this am I? And if it's, fairly high, then take the step back and distance yourself. Distance provides clarity.
Yeah, as a rule, it does. Sometimes it's not always easy to, especially when you are emotionally invested in a decision, or, in a team member, or whatever the situation may be. And sometimes it's hard to step back from that and
it is
distance yourself from that. It's the human condition, I guess. And
right.
I guess it's something that we can train ourselves to do that, but it's not always easy.
Right. And sometimes, I recommend that you think about what that emotion is, and maybe it's helpful in your decision-making for that situation, depending on what it is, and if it is appropriate for that situation. Maybe your emotion that you're feeling is empathy for someone, and that's driving the decision. Well, I'm not saying empathy is a bad thing to be inserting into that decision. It could be a good thing. So we just have to think about it. And that's the whole idea behind confront the lizard. My mantra is thinking about it, not letting the emotion carry you, the lizard brain and its emotion make your decision for you. Just think about it, and think about whether it aligns with your values to have that emotion driving your decision-making process.
Yeah, it's a great tip. Yeah, great tip. So as any final words, have you got any final words for our audience?
Well, I would just say, always keep in mind when you are, going about your business and your professional life, that always try to keep your values top of mind and your higher level goals, so that you can use those as the filter for what you say, what you do, and the decisions that you make, rather than being driven by a part of your brain that's millions of years old.
And do you have a podcast, Dave, or a book that you'd like to promote?
Well, I have a website, stevehaffner.com, and that's Steve, HAFFNER.com. And I do have a weekly newsletter called Cognizance, and you can sign up for there on my website. And I've got a couple of books that will be coming out this year, but they're not available yet. I do have a small ebook on my website called 7 Strategies for Making Great Decisions, which is available. You can just download it as a PDF, and you will get on the Cognizance newsletter as well. And I just every week I provide more information, insights into decision making and productivity and how to overcome some of our cognitive illusions.
Well, I'll have to go and check that out.
Yes, please do.
All right. It's lovely having you on and talking about, how the brain works and how we can use it a little bit better, and how it can align with our business and our values, and not get stuck so much into the emotional stuff that sometimes, it's not necessary to have.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun talking with you, Rose.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Have a great day.
All righty. You too. Bye-bye.
Talking with the experts.